The wholesome love story of a young man who was bullied throughout high school and a female gorilla. For better or worse, this story begins. I'm just kidding, guys. Trust me, the story's not what you think it is. A Japanese high school student named Seiichi Hiragi is our protagonist. He's fat, ugly, and short. The story also wants you to know that our protagonist is smelly because, well, it's relevant. Anyway, so Seiichi is living his life as a high school student. You can probably guess what life must be like for him. He gets bullied, mocked, ostracized, and downright neglected. It's hard not to feel some sense of sympathy for this protagonist. And there are other students in his school who feel the same way as well. They know that despite Seiichi's appearance and status, he's genuinely a good guy who'd lend a helping hand to just about anyone. However, one day his class receives a message from a metaphysical entity who informs them about how they are about to be isekai'd to another world. Though they'll have to pair up with each other because the voice says so. Which is why the stats and basic abilities of all the students start showing up on a blue screen. So considering this and other things, they all start choosing their partners. As you can expect, Seiichi is the only one who doesn't get chosen. If his general appearance wasn't enough, the man was cursed with level 1 stats. Any rational student just wouldn't choose him. He can only watch as all of his other students disappear right before him. But then the voice decides to take him to the other world anyway. He's given a special skill, which basically allows him to adapt to just about anything. But instead of the civilization where the others were teleported, Seiichi ends up in the middle of nowhere. It's like the Amazon rainforest, just a massive jungle where it's him and the animals. Seiichi soon finds a fruit which tastes disgusting, and no, it's not a devil fruit. What we have here is the fruit of evolution. Eating this fruit somehow causes a change to happen in his body. He loses some body fat, and a robotic voice tells him about how the fruit he ate basically helps things evolve. So he continues to find ways to survive. Sometimes he steals food and this fruit from the animals, sometimes he does something else, but before he knew it, he had lost most of his body fat, he had gotten taller, and was now looking more like a harem protagonist. This way of life continues for over 5 months, during which he never comes across another human. And then one day, a rare reddish-pink gorilla shows up. Things look like they could go wrong because this gorilla is something akin to a final boss, but Seiichi's physical appearance and demeanor impress her so much that she instantly falls in love with him. You heard that right, this female gorilla is now in love with our protagonist. Seiichi is rather reserved because he doesn't really swing that way, however he continues to humor her as she starts doing housewife things for him. She takes care of things, washes his clothes, makes food, and even explains how this world works. When he tries to escape, she finds him and brings him back. She's basically his wife, and so from this point forward, we'll be addressing her by her real name, which is Saria. These easygoing days continue until one day when he tries to escape again, only to then come across a certain cave, which Saria had warned him about. It is here that Seiichi realizes that there's more than one boss-level enemy in this forest. Inside the cave was an undead knight. First, he's surprised by Seiichi's entrance. He didn't know there were any humans out here in the forest, but then that surprise turns to contempt as the knight prepares himself to kill our protagonist. And he was definitely strong enough to do so. Seiichi's life was in danger, but right at the critical point when a sword strike is going to end him, Saria shows up right between the strike and Seiichi and ends up taking the sword in his stead. Until this point, Seiichi wasn't really as serious about Saria as she was, but seeing her basically give her life to save him was eye-opening. Tears start flowing out of his eyes as he realizes just how ungrateful he's been of Saria. Her soul fades away, and the sadness turns into anger as Seiichi braces himself to stop the undead knight. And using a little bit of this and that, he somehow manages to win. He kills the undead knight and hence in turn also ends up freeing the man's soul. Following this battle, Seiichi shares a few moments with Saria's soul. They both tear up, and as a display of their love for each other, they share a kiss. But fate works in mysterious ways, because the moment he kisses Saria, she evolves into a glorious girl with radiant red hair, just lying there in all her naked glory. Congratulations! Your gorilla has evolved into an anime waifu. And just like how Saria evolved, Seiichi evolves as well. Over the past 5 or so months, he has had plenty of subtle evolutions. He was already good looking, but now with this one, Seiichi turns into a tall, handsome, and fit young man. His physical appearance has done a 180 compared to where he was before coming to this world. Now handsome, Seiichi's about to share a pleasant moment with Saria when a sheep-like mascot character pops up out of nowhere and reveals himself to be the administrator of this dungeon. He gives Saria a beautiful white dress and Seiichi a helmet, which will later reveal itself to be a robe because, well, magic, and then teleports them outside of this forest. Their journey together had only just begun. As for Seiichi's classmates from back in school, they're doing well, I guess, in the sense that they're being actively trained, but unlike what they may have expected in the beginning, this seems more like physical training class. Where is the fun, the effort, and the adventure? They all wonder. Their goal is to defeat the demon lord so why isn't the reality of their training matching that vibe? By the way, a few students seem genuinely concerned about Seiichi. Little do they know that their loser buddy has already gotten married. Going back to Seiichi and Saria, they travel through the lands, kill slimes, and Seiichi's helmet turns into a robe like it was supposed to. Soon enough, they arrive at the royal capital of Wimberg and try to join the local adventurers guild. In doing so, they will also get official IDs. Once inside, all they see are perverts, shamelessly engaging in their fetishes out in the open. Seiichi was alright, but he didn't want his sweet wife seeing all this, so he decides to walk out with her, but they're stopped by the guild master, who then introduces them to an astounding girl named Artoria. They'll now have to finish some jobs under her supervision to become official members. Her pretty chocolate skin and brazen clothes make her look like she's tough nut to crack, but Artoria is just a sweet and kind girl who only ever wants to do good. Saria starts by looking after some kids in a church, while Seiichi takes care of a building demolition, and then he also walks a noble lady's dog. All in all, our duo manages to accomplish these swift tasks quite quickly. Though moving on, Artoria asks him to take something more akin to an official test, and yes, considering how Seiichi and Saria got here, this was easy enough for them. That is, until they fall into a trap and get teleported into a dungeon. This dungeon is presumably inhabited by the Black Dragon God, and now that they're here, they find themselves trapped in an astounding labyrinth. A wall pops up out of nowhere and separates Artoria from the other two. While she has to fight things, the other two end up coming across a chest, which allows them to level up even more. Artoria keeps moving forward, but sadly ends up in the deepest reach of the dungeon, right where the Black Dragon God resides. Honestly, this girl has no luck at all. There's actually a myth in the world of this story where whoever runs into the Black Dragon God has the worst luck. As you can expect, she's left with no choice but to fend for herself against this dragon god, and the poor girl stands no chance. She was at the brink of death when suddenly Seiichi and Saria pop up and save her life. Seiichi now has to fight the dragon himself, but it's a level 5000 beast. To put this in perspective, when he was summoned, he was level 1. Saria was the level 1000 gorilla, and then the undead knight was level 1500. These two were tough opponents for him, which is why it's easy to see how Seiichi may have a tough time against this. It's tough in the beginning, but Seiichi once again manages to pull through. He slashes the dragon and effectively slays him. In turn, it also grants him the power of spatial magic, along with many other boosts. Using this, he teleports them all back to where they were. He was carrying Artoria when they walked back to the guild, but she just starts blaming herself for all that happened. As it turns out, her bad luck is no joke. It's minus 2 million, and this looks serious. She is misfortune personified. Artoria was looking pretty down in the dumps, but Seiichi assures her that it'll be okay. Everyone loves her. Then later, while she's shedding tears by herself, Seiichi shows up from behind, gives her a warm hug, and then puts a rare ring on her finger. It was something he found back in the dungeon. It's pretty much a confession. Conveniently, the ring had special abilities which nullified her bad luck and blessed her with good luck instead. Everything Seiichi did makes her so happy that our sweet chocolatey girl turns bright red, pushes Seiichi away, and then runs. Classic Sundari moment. Subsequently, a high authority in the Demon Lord's army hears about the Black Dragon God's death. They wonder if someone has started a war between the humans and the demons again. Now Seiichi realizes that it's about time he started looking for any information he could find about his classmates. He goes to the royal library and starts hitting the books. Meanwhile, Artoria is hopelessly in love with him, so much so she can't stop clustering for a single moment. Seiichi was also thinking about Artoria. He wanted to make things up with her, and that was bothering him. When he's at the cafe, the manager and a good local named Ronze tells him to be honest with her. Similarly, Artoria is vividly told by her friend Adriana about how she's madly in love with him. Soon enough, the two come face to face with each other. They're approaching each other, and just like that, Artoria's already blessed our protagonist with a kiss. This was her confession. Although she knows that he already has Saria, she wants to be with him as well. Surprisingly enough, Saria witnesses this and just casually gives them permission to be lovers. Rejoice, Seiichi. Now you have two beautiful girls by your side, and they love you with all their heart. Anyway, so in the wake of the recent events, Seiichi becomes an A-rank adventurer, and so the guildmaster tells him to get himself a horse because just what is an adventurer without a horse? Sure enough, he takes them up on the advice and visits the local stable. There are quite a lot of strong horses, but he ends up choosing the rather aggressive female donkey. She seems hungry, so he gets her some food. He also comes across a young artist named May who is being bothered by her friend to enter the royal art competition, which will be held about a month after the race. Seiichi notices this and tells him that if he wins the race, May shall enter the competition. They have themselves a deal. The day of the competition soon arrived, and our donkey, named Lulun, seemed sick and tired because she didn't have a proper breakfast before getting here. This causes them to lag behind the others when the race starts, but Seiji had one of those fruit of evolution on him. He feeds one to her, and thanks to it, she instantly unleashes Super Saiyan levels of improvement in speed and aggressiveness. Seiji and Lulun not only bypass everyone else, they also destroy the traps that were set up by those who were ahead. They end up finishing in first place, and guess what? Thanks to that fruit of evolution, Lulu turns into a donkey girl. It leads to yet another embarrassing scene because she obviously didn't have any clothes on. But for what it's worth, Seiichi now has 3 girls. All 3 of them were having a moment with him, but then he was escorted to the castle by the Valkyries. This development is because he won first place in the race. As a reward, he gets to spend a day with the Valkyries. These are girls who are revered as the strongest warriors in the kingdom. Once there, the captain of the Valkyries, named Louise Blaze, challenges him to a training match. With her gentle blue hair, she has quite a graceful appearance, not to mention her reputation as the strongest Valkyrie. That's not an individual that should be taken lightly in any context. At first, Seiichi thinks he wouldn't be able to stand a chance against her, but when their duel begins, he neatly dodges her attacks and disarms her before she knows it. That's right, even Seiji himself doesn't know just how high the limits of his abilities go. Louise was taken aback by this, but she accepts her loss and declares that from this point onward, she is Seiichi's apprentice. Though before this could develop any further, the king of this kingdom is attacked by an assassin. This was an emergency. All the Valkyries immediately act. They apprehend the assassin, who appears to be a little girl. Subsequently, Seiichi's classmates are now seen as students at the Barbador Magical Academy. So now they are in the case of a demon nation, which is led by the demon lord's own daughter. While the girl was in the hands of the Valkyries, Seiichi realizes that the king was fatally wounded. He's now in a critical condition because of the curse. Seiichi uses his abilities to understand the king's medical situation and cures him using a healing spell. As it turns out, the king's actually the good man he met at the cafe who told him to just be honest with Artoria. This earns him trust of the king, and the king also gives him the freedom to practice and learn skills in the castle. Meanwhile, the mentor who was in charge of the students asks the emperor about why they were sent to that academy. To this, the emperor reveals that he had placed bracelets on all the students in order to make sure that they never become a threat to their empire. He's also the one who sent that little girl to assassinate the king of Seiichi's kingdom. It's revealed that this girl is from an ancient race, who is now being used by the emperor as a slave. Speaking of the little girl, her name is Oliga, and she's now being interrogated by the Valkyries. They aren't being too nice, but after noticing that Oliga was wearing a slave collar, which is basically the cause of why she did what she did, they decide to stop interrogating. Seiichi's other girls get there too, and of course, they are welcome. He then uses his abilities to break the collar, and he also creates his own liberation spell, which essentially frees Oliga. The girl simply bursts into tears. She's genuinely grateful for this. She introduces herself and explains how she was separated from her kind when she was even younger, and the emperor then had her be trained to be an assassin. She feels disgusted with herself and states that her hands are full of blood. But Seiichi holds her hands and comforts her by stating that it wasn't her fault. No, the one in the wrong was the Kaiser Empire. Seiichi also tells her that she will be his younger sister from now on. Poor little girl was slaving away all this time without ever getting the chance to rest or catch a break, but now she can. She's still afraid though of what the Empire might do, but Seiichi assures her that he is much stronger than he looks. After this, Seiichi trains a little bit with the Valkyries, but apparently Louise had to go take a look at the borders because of some monster activity that had been reported. And it's the enemy. So she tells Seiichi to take care of the king while she's away. The girl has a lot of respect for Seiichi. Days go by, and soon it's been a week since Louise left with her army. Today was a special day though, because the legendary wizard named Barnabas was here. He is the one who mentored the current king. The old man mentions the students were transferred to the Barbador Magical Academy. This is the first time Seiichi finally learned something about the whereabouts of his former classmates. While this comical yet interesting conversation was going on, a soldier arrives in the castle and informs them about an army of 5,000 monsters that is about to invade the capital city. Louise and the Valkyries are fighting against the monsters on the border, along with the legendary Black Paladin, who is this nation's finest soldier, which is why there's no one who can protect the capital. This is where Seiichi comes in, along with the remaining soldiers and the Adventurers Guild. The gang unites to take down the monsters. Seiichi's girl team seems especially motivated to steamroll the enemy. Seiichi and Barnabas observe with the king while everyone else attacks. He was getting impatient, but the old wizard tells him to simply observe and see the power of their allies. Sure enough, the Adventurers Guild was casually using perverted traps and whatnot on the monsters. In the end, Seiichi didn't have to do a thing while everyone else eliminated the monstrous army, and they rejoice. Sadly, this was just the first wave of the army. The next one coming is much stronger and devious. When they arrive, things don't go nearly as well as last time. This prompts Seiichi to act. He comes up with an offensive spell called Judgment, and this spell basically just works like a cheat code. Within a moment, lightning flashes from the skies and specifically kills all the enemies. Smoked. Just like that, he had eliminated the second wave of the army. His level increases several folds and he becomes even stronger. The great wizard Barnabas commends his talents and asks him if he'd like to be a teacher at the Barbador Academy. Naturally, Seiichi's excited by this opportunity. He gets to teach magic and the students will be his former classmates. But he wants Barnabas to wait until after Louise and her Valkyries have returned because leaving the capital unattended would not be a wise decision. Plus, he also has the girls to look after. But Barnabas is okay with it. He can wait, and when Louise returns, he can then bring the girls to the academy as well. In the following days, Seiichi and the girls have quite a lot of wholesome moments together, just walking around, being silly and careless, and then, of course, there was the art contest. Remember that girl who had to participate if Seiichi won the race? Well, she ended up winning first place. As for what she drew, it was a beautiful painting of Seiichi riding Lulun. Though it happened soon enough, Louise returns along with all the Valkyries, and so Seiichi and his girls bid farewell to the city. They will definitely return though. Meanwhile, the Demon Lord is disappointed because his army's lost and he wasn't able to resurrect himself. But then a follower of the Demon Lord reveals that their next target is the Barbador Academy. This is where the first season of the anime finishes things up, but of course the story continues in the next season. The adventures of Seiichi and his girls have only just begun in the grand context of this series. And that's the end of the video. As always, if you liked what you saw, subscribe to the channel. I'll be uploading a lot of videos just like this, so I'll see you at the next one.